Hi everyone. Again, I'm happy to welcome you on our tap room. My name is Alex Karolets. I'm the solutions engineer here on StarWind. And the main theme we will be talking about today is achieving the true level of fault tolerance in the vSphere environment. But before we speak about actual steps to perform for deploying highly available and fault-tolerant solution for your production, just wanted to talk a little about the common vSphere environments that can be seen in many companies. So, like sometimes when the company size is not huge, administrators save some resources by running the production on a single server. Sometimes it happens that administrators do some wrong configurations that can possibly lead to bad things in case of power failure or hardware failure or whatever. Okay, so yeah, VMware guys made one of the best virtualization platforms even ever, like using their hypervisor called ESXi with the managing and monitoring tool, the vCenter allows administrators to gather all company services into a single management and monitoring interface, thus utilizing less hardware resources because all services will run on a single server, and giving them detailed overview of the whole production. With the vSphere, the support of the company's production becomes easy peasy. But of course, one day a question of data availability raises. So if the production will be running on a single server and something will happen with this single server, there is a quite high chance of important data to be lost, or some like stopped applications will result in money loss just because clients lost the connection to this application and left. And also, like creating a backup for the data will not work as fine. So like you have the data, but you have no availability. And yeah, I guess let's just start with some hardware tips, which will allow you to increase the system resiliency. So the first and the most important step to provide high availability for the applications and services is data replication between the servers. Of course, you can have a single storage, some kind of SAN or NAS or just JBOD maybe. And you can have a couple servers to run virtual machines, but in case if something will happen with the storage box, here we go again looking for the data that did survive. So let's study this case on a hyperconverged infrastructure. We have two clustered servers. Each of them has its own local storage. A good choice would be to replicate the data between the servers. So in case if even one of the servers will break, you have the data replicated on the second server and obviously a compute power to boot up the applications and continue working. More networks you have between the servers is better. So what happened with the production in case of network failure? You can possibly catch a split brain scenario if one of the servers will stop receiving the changes of the data. So one of the hosts goes down, and when you switch to the second, you will be surprised that the network card wasn't working for a long time, and the data you have on the server is filled with dust. So if you use switches in your environment, make the number of switches at least 2 to eliminate single point of failure. As for the hardware resiliency, it is always better to replicate the data within a single server, because any possible disk failures will help you to save the data and save the time needed for the recovery. Just like rebuild a disk in a RAID group and you finished. But of course, choose RAID level wisely, because just gathering a ton of 12 terabyte drives in RAID 5 will play a dirty joke with you. Okay, so the domain connectivity must not be a problem as well. So keep the domain controller count at 2 and have one of them deployed outside your infrastructure. Less time to recover from total blackout, the better for the company's profit. You can also find one of my previous webinars just about the proper domain controller configurations on our website. Okay. Also keep size of the production with the future growth possibility. So if you will run like 90% of the computer sources of each node, and you will replicate the virtual machines, create high availability in your environment. So in case of a single server failure, you will face some troubles with the VMs unable to boot because of insufficient resources. So just keep no more than like 50% of your cluster compute free. Okay. And yeah, of course, a couple of tweaks to increase the performance. So get the proper provisioning for your virtual machine and storage controllers. When we will talk about StarWind implementation, I will show you that we have the provisioned eager-zeroed storage assigned to StarWind VMs. That helps to increase storage performance. Also keep the number of shared data stores of 2. It will be required for the fault tolerance feature I will touch on about a minute. And also you can use some of the hardware virtualization features such as PCI pass-through, SRIUV to give virtual machines direct access to some hardware resources. And of course, if you have this feature available for you to use it. So it is called a fault tolerance by VMware. So it is available for vSphere standard and enterprise licenses and provides you with the live migration, even in case of power failure of one of the nodes. Without this feature, VMware does quick migration to all virtual machines. So it means that you will have a little downtime, size of which only equals the time needed for VMs to boot up with the compute power of the second server. And with the fault tolerance feature enabled on the virtual machine, it will live migrate without shutting down, and clients will have an instant access to it. So without like any interruptions, just maybe a couple seconds of freeze or a little disconnect. So something like that. It is made by running a shadow copy of the virtual machine on a second server. So yeah, you're consuming more compute resources, but this feature can be assigned on mission-critical applications only, while the rest of the virtual machines will quick migrate with the vMotion feature. Okay, and all we need to add to the vSphere environment is a shared storage. So using StarWind VSAN, we can create highly available storage and forget about troubles with the data accessibility. So in the VMware environment, StarWind is represented as a virtual storage appliance. So being Windows native application, we need a virtual machine to be configured in. Luckily, we have a couple options in here. So one of them is to build a Windows-based virtual machine on each physical host and install StarWind there. And the second one is to build a Windows-based, not Windows-based, is to build a OVF template of our new StarWind virtual SAN for vSphere, which is based on a Linux operating system. So the rest configuration remains the same for both installations. So we have a local storage on each node used for creating highly available data stores. We have a couple of networks to synchronize the data and connect the storage via iSCSI. We have Heartbeat that allows us to avoid any split brain scenario. And finally, we can place virtual machines on top of highly available storage provided by StarWind. Okay, so I guess the best one would be just see all of this from a technical side. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our vSphere environment. Currently, it's running on ESXi 6.7. And we have two hosts gathered in a cluster. So we can build the highly available configuration out of it. So as I mentioned before, we need to be configured, StarWind needs to be configured in virtual machines. And as you can see here, we have two virtual machines. Actually, these are the Linux virtual machines that were made out of our OVF templates. And it comes as a virtual appliance, so all in one with StarWind installed. And all you need to is just to deploy this virtual machine from the OVF template, connect to it, create a couple of networks, create a couple of StarWind devices, and just connect them back to the vSphere client. Okay, so just to show you, here we have one of the virtual machines running. It has its own interface. As you can see here, some of the performance metrics you can see here. And here we have our storage assigned for creating a shared storage. So regarding the networking, we have one connection here assigned for the iSCSI, and the second one for the synchronization channel. And the third one is basically our management with which we can connect to this virtual machine. Okay, so let me just show you our StarWind. So this is the management console installed on my computer, so I can connect to both virtual machines containing StarWind from any place I can bring my computer. And as you can see here, we have a couple of hosts and a couple of StarWind devices already created and replicated between the nodes. So these devices are connected by iSCSI to the vSphere environment, and I can show you right now that one. So we can go to the storage adapters, find our iSCSI software adapter, and as you can see here, we have our iSCSI network connected to both nodes. So one of the nodes is number 10, and the second one is number 12. As you can see here, we have 4 paths. All of them are active. So in case if like we have 2 data stores, 4 paths. In case if one of the nodes will be lost, vSphere environment still has the access to the StarWind storage through the another path. And yeah, something like that. So after connecting our highly available devices to the vSphere back again, we can create a simple data stores, as you can see here. So we have two of them already being created as a VMFS6 volumes. And let's just go back to our cluster, and let's see on one of the virtual machines running in there. So this is the Ubuntu virtual machine, and it's configured in a fault tolerance mode. So its storage remains on the StarWind highly available device. So we have the storage being connected to both nodes. And what we need to achieve in the final configuration is that this virtual machine needs to live migrate to the second host without any like downtimes, without any rebootings or something like that. And by using the simple feature called fault tolerance, VMware fault tolerance, you can see it here, we can assign this feature on some of the virtual machines in order for them to create a shadow copy of the computer sources on the second host of this virtual machine. And in case if a primary virtual machine that is running right now, as you can see here, it's running on the second host. If it will be, if the second host will go down, this virtual machine will become primary on the first host, and its compute is already running on the first host. So literally, you have two virtual machines running, but with the with the single StarWind storage. Okay, and I guess the best one would be just to show you the proof of concept. What happens when one of the hosts goes down, and what happens to this virtual machine. So let's just connect to this virtual machine and see that it works completely fine. So we can log in into it. Okay, so some of the folders are already open. Let's just keep it like that one and see how it goes. So right now it's running on the second host. Let's just do something with the second host. For example, cut off the power on that server. Okay, so let me just perform that. Okay. Okay, so VMware environment needs a couple seconds to realize that something happened with the second host, so we need just to refresh this vCenter. And as you can see here, so we cannot use the virtual machine right now, so it's lost the connection. The connection to the clients would be dropped in any case, but we're still protected, and we need just a couple seconds to wait. You can see that StarWind notifies us that something happened with the second host, the connection is lost. Okay, and we need just to reconnect to this virtual machine. Okay, let's just do it again. And see, everything is working. So we have our progress, unsaved progress, saved within the virtual machine, so nothing happened. And all your clients need to do is just to reconnect to this virtual machine and continue working. So when this situation comes in place, the virtual machine becomes primary on the node that is live, and then you can just move the secondary to the second host, something like that. And I guess, yeah, something like that. So that's all I wanted to show you. And with all the tweaks and tips and with the functionality of vSphere and StarWind highly available storage, we can achieve the full fault tolerance for virtual machines if you need it to be assigned. So yeah, and I guess it is time for your questions. So if you have any, please write them down in the questions tab. And the first question I already been seeing is that Michael Coronado asks, does OVF already exist or do I need to create it? So you can download the OVF template from our site and just mount it to your vSphere environment. That's straight simple. Okay, Faisal Ashfaq asks, thank you for the demo. VMware FT is required, or can we get around it with the VMware Essentials version? So with VMware Essentials version, you can use only the quick migration. So you can use the StarWind to create highly available device. The data will be saved. The cache is, if it was enabled, the cache of the virtual machines will be saved because we are replicating cache as well between the nodes. And if something happens with one of the hosts, this cache quickly gets written on the storage of the second node. And the next time you will boot the virtual machine, so once it will be booted, you have all the data still up to date. And unfortunately, the fault tolerance feature starts with the standard version, and VMware Essentials version doesn't have it on board. Pat Shepard asks, can you talk about using Flash for cache as performance improvement? Yeah, so on board with StarWind, we have our Flash cache enabled to assigning on the StarWind devices. The only thing is that it works on, in the write-through mode, and it will just increase the read performance of your production. Just like, yeah, something like that. So you can use the RAM cache, it's replicated, and it will increase the performance of both read and write operations. But with the, like, as you may know, the RAM is volatile memory. And in case of two-node shutdown, some of the latest changes would be lost in this case. And if you use just the flash cache, so all the changes are saved automatically on these SSD drives you're using for that one. And yeah, that's why the flash cache is good in this case, in this particular case. Okay. What is the licensing model of the SolarWind? I guess you mean like StarWind Virtual SAN. So we have a couple of licenses. If we're talking about the software licenses, so we have our standard edition, which will allow you to create up to 4 terabytes of usable capacity replicated between the servers. We have also like professional edition, that's up to 8 terabytes of usable capacity replicated. And we have enterprise, as far as I remember, with the unlimited amount of terabytes. But of course, I guess like that's not the question for me. You can always contact our sales guys and your sales representative in your region and ask all of these questions. They are extremely friendly to customers, and they will help you with all of these questions. And of course, you will have, if you will have any technical questions, they will redirect them to us, and we will be able to answer all of these questions. Okay. So what is the max cache drive size can be assigned to StarWind storage? You can assign the unlimited amount of cache. If we're talking about the RAM cache, we're recommending to assign 1 gigabyte per 1 terabyte of StarWind storage. And if we're talking about the flash cache, it's recommended to assign 10% of the usable capacity. So for example, if you have 10 terabytes StarWind device, so you need to assign 1 terabyte of flash cache in order to get this working properly. Okay, what is the requirements for FT using vSAN? So there are no quite requirements. The only requirements for FT has DFT for the virtual machines. So in the latest version of the vSphere 6.7, fault tolerance supports up to 8 virtual CPUs and 128 gigabytes of RAM per fault tolerance protected virtual machine. That's a restriction for enterprise license if you have the enterprise. As for the standard license, maximum of 2 vCPUs are allowed maximum. And also for the larger 8 vCPU fault tolerance virtual machines, 10 gigabit network is required. So we have separated network being used for the fault tolerance, and in case the virtual machines are big enough, so we need to use 10 gigabits. So if one of the nodes goes down of StarWind, how can it be recovered? Can we just add another node and replicate? There are like couple options to choose from. So the first one would be just to run your production on a single host that remains active, and do some reconfigurations, fix the second host, then bring it back online and synchronize the data that was changed upon this time. And the second one would be just, bring another host, create a StarWind installation in there, and then just make this node as a cluster in the VMware environment, and then go to the StarWind where your production is running on the first node, and just replicate the data to this host. So Syed Hussein asks, I get this message, insufficient disk space on data store while configuring FT using StarWind VSAN. Yeah, so just for that one, the fault tolerance requires some of the storage to be assigned on another HA device. So let me just show you quickly. Okay. So when you're enabling the fault tolerance feature, it requires to create a copy of this virtual machine on another data store. So for example, like if you have 2 data stores, let's say 1 terabyte each, 2 StarWind data stores presented via StarWind. So in this case, like if you have the virtual machine, something like 500 gigabytes. So you need, in order to activate the fault tolerance feature, you need to create a copy of this virtual machine on another StarWind data store. So it is additional 500 gigabytes. So yeah, that's how like the fault tolerance from VMware works. So it needs just 2 replicas on each server of the storage, but normally it runs just because of StarWind replicating the storage between the nodes. It runs only from a single node, and yeah, something like that. VM data storage size 200 gigabytes. So in this case, you need to double check that you have another data store with at least 200 gigabytes. And when you will enable the fault tolerance feature, you need to choose this data store. So for example, you've just created a virtual machine on the data store 2, and you need to replicate it via the fault tolerance feature on the data store 1. Okay, I can see another question from Josh Wilmarth. Is StarWind compatible with Vim? Yes, of course. So we are partners with Vim, and we can use this software. And normally, like in our VTL appliances, we recommend to use Vim in order to create the backups. So just one of our products called VTL, Cloud VTL, is based on Vim, and it replicates the backups into the cloud by using Vim software. Okay, and one more question I can see. Philip Ross, are there any limitations using VMware? Yeah, I've already answered this question. So up to 8 vCPUs and 128 gigabytes of RAM in the enterprise level license, and up to 2 vCPUs for the standard license. Okay, do I need to use fault tolerance on all my virtual machines? Not really. You can activate this feature on the most mission critical VMs you have, so the rest of the VMs will be migrated with the power of StarWind. Just like because of synchronous storage and cache replication, all data on VMs will be up to date, and these virtual machines will be just booted on a server that is live. So, like, in case if you have any questions left, you can ask them now, or you can always ask them later on our social media. Can we watch this webinar offline after today? Yeah, so in a couple of days, this webinar would be on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So you will be able to see this. Okay, so yeah, I don't see any questions left. So yeah, thank you again. Thanks for your time. It was a pleasure for me to speak here about making production in vSphere truly fault tolerant and high available. So yeah, have a great rest of the day. Bye bye, and fly safe.